Hello, Hive Mind. My name is Nathaniel Kapnicki, but many of you may know me as Nate Cap. I want to thank you for tuning in to this presentation titled Relumination of the Imagination. I want to make it clear that this is definitely not some magic show where everybody gets a better imagination, and if it does, that's awesome. In short, this presentation explores the inherent cosmic tools that the imagination uses in conjunction with the knowledge of the mystery traditions in order to better learn and restore what got misplaced in ancient Egypt. It's an attempt to inspire or rekindle the inner sacred flame of care back into aggregate consciousness. We've been dismembered from principles and much of our past. We've been scattered from our purity, and we must remember or bind ourselves back to the universal, non-man-made law where our connection to nature is pure. Relumination of the imagination symbolically but not literally means to reignite the holy fire that has been systematically blown out. It's about the beginning process of mastering the self and the start of the great work. It's about allowing the unfoldment of the open mind and kicking all the planted programs completely out. Breaking free from, the many millenniums of man-made mind cages we've been perpetuated into. By the end of this presentation, I hope that I've made it clear to the viewer what the title truly means. And just to be clear, this presentation isn't just going to magically heighten or, illuminate anyone either. I hope it does. Just make sure to listen all the way through. And this presentation might seem out there at times because many of the topics are abstract because we're simply dealing with the imagination. And if or when a moment of doubt arises, I assure you there will be some sort of logical explanation that eventually follows. Believe me, I'm not here to, waste anybody's time with, made up, non-science, non-logical jargon. We're going to, take a really beneficial journey into and out of the mind here today. I'm going to cover many key components regarding the imagination and how it has become stagnant in our modern world. But before I begin, I'd like to thank Brandon Martin and the whole crew at One Great Work Network for helping get the Seed for Growth conference put together. It has been a lot of work, and we are really excited that we can make this event happen. It's an honor to be in this lineup of such caring and hard-working adults with a similar ambition to do the right thing. Because this presentation is only around an hour and 45 minutes, I'd like to say, if by the end you find value and want to know more regarding the topics I've covered, you can listen to the Cubbyhole podcasts in order through cubbyhole.com/podcast, and some of the content found in this presentation is a lot more defined there. And also, I'll be defining and expanding more on these topics in the future shows. So stay tuned for that. I'm only going to touch on many key topics to make my points because this is a very condensed presentation. The topics I'm going to cover are so extremely important for human progress and evolution, and it needs to be learned if we wish to understand the hidden realm of the universe. And why does that matter? Well, it matters because it is one of the most powerful keys towards achieving freedom. How do I know this? Well, because freedom doesn't involve man's authority, which is holding most people back from evolution and aggregate consciousness. So, this is about helping that evolution to advance collectively. And maybe, that's not what you want. But if you know deep down that working towards freedom is the right thing to do, then you're right where you need to be. There really are only two types of minds, and one is self-omniscient, believing that one knows everything, which is, really unhealthy, and it's closed-minded skepticism, which only leads to stagnation, not to mention other horrific atrocities. Or the other mind, which is the Shoshin, or the beginner's mind, the mind that is always learning and open to all possibilities. And I'm assuming the listeners here are ready with their Shoshin and ready to learn something valuable. The topics for this presentation are: number one, imagination. What is it? Where is it? How is it used? And then the division, which is the division within and the symbolic journey of self. And then number three is inherent spiritual tools. What are they? Where are they? What are they used for? How are they discovered? Number four, understanding. What truly defines understanding? How does understanding help find truth? Number five, the temple within. What can help us understand our journey within? Number six, the destructive causation of imagination. How the imagination is being destroyed, and by what and by who. Number seven, intelligent measurement of human behavior. What governs behavior, and how do we become conscious of this? Number eight, relumination. What is relumination, really? How much do we care to know how things really are? Number nine, authority. Who is true authority of you? Who's the true authority of you? Who writes your life? Are you willing to realize your responsibility in nature? Okay, so what is imagination? And it's a huge question, and I'd say it's one of the most perplexing questions because it's not immediately clear what it is. And of course, I'm sure we can all agree that deep down we all intimately know what it is, but when we find it difficult to explain it, we find it difficult to explain imagination in a precise way. It's like trying to explain, what the creator is or the universe is. So to define this word imagination requires imagination, which really can't be well defined, especially with the limitations of logic only. I see the word imagination as an umbrella term, as we'll see throughout this presentation. There's so many ways to understand this unfoldment of a concept. Many people tend to believe what imagination solely is, or solely means, is creating or making up random things, or recreating events in certain redefined ways, or, weird theories or abstract or exaggerated expressions in art, or pretending, like the act of role-playing. Random use of the imagination is imagination without knowledge or science or reasoning, but is mostly from experience and the subconscious. Looking at the etymology of imagination, we see it's from the Latin imago, which means image, and the noun imaginare, which means picture to oneself. And I like the idea of the imagination as the act of seeing and testing ideas within, or orienting the mind in any possible position of seeing. So how do we orient with the imagination? We do this by aligning and positioning the mind, whether microcosmic or macrocosmic, into relative points of time and space. The etymology of orient actually means the direction east, the part of the horizon where the sun first appears. And this is about realizing where your position is because you know where the sun is or where it will rise with respect to your coordinates. It is one of the most pure, unambiguous ways to orient or to know where we are and what time of the day it is in relation to the sun. This is key to understanding the tools that guides imagination. What happens when you close your eyes and envision or think of something like an evergreen tree? I'd assume an image of what you understand to be an evergreen tree pops up in your mind, right? You're literally imagining probably a faint to possibly clear idea of what an evergreen tree is or that it isn't really there. But you know or you can feel its essence or idea, right? Now, there's a reason we have this tool. It's to give us power to see verbal stories and potentialities, to focus on or manifest ideas. And these images might not come through clear, but we know what they are and can kind of, see into the future based on the knowledge and experiences we have regarding these ideas or images. When it comes to the organ that is most associated with these abilities of imagining is the pineal gland, which is the pine cone shaped tissue located in the middle part of the brain between the two hemispheres. And it is in conjunction with the imagination as the eye that processes and joins knowledge. It joins creativity and experience to generate vision that has the potential to decode the mysteries of ourselves and the universe. It's also what we use to empathize with, to try and think what others think, to orient ourselves to feel what other sentient beings feel or experience. For this next slide, I want to mention that the higher imagination is a term I'm going to use to help me make some important hard points. Higher imagination is the ability to orient one's mind anywhere in the universe, combined with higher knowledge to intelligently envision beyond the logical threshold, to think, entertain, and visualize dualistically, literally, and symbolically above what could ever be taught. When higher knowledge, aka knowledge of the self, origins, principles, and or the esoteric mystery traditions is taken in, imagination applies to the processing and understanding of that knowledge, which then can generate many intelligent ideas and help solve many equations of life that come up as a result. Higher imagination is the generated capacity to push beyond the limitations of logic, especially because knowledge can only take us so far. It is imagination applied with and transcending higher knowledge of self. And the higher knowledge of self has been recorded and stored for hundreds of thousands of years. It's about evolving consciousness towards freedom. That's what imagination can do, and it does. It's about overcoming the five sense illusion. Much of the higher knowledge of self is abstract, which requires imagination in order to decode and unveil the mysteries and secrets that are hidden all around us and in us. It's all about the requirement of having an adult vision along with the key of patience. Patience with the ego. We have to be able to keep our patience with the ego because it wants to dismiss what it fears and doesn't understand. And this is why those who are more left-brained have a harder time with abstract concepts like this, like what I'm sharing. Skepticism ruled by ego will never pierce the veil to see beyond the material realm. That's really important to understand. And Gary Lockman, the author of Lost Knowledge of the Imagination, said, "True imagination has a transformative power. It can alchemically transmute information from the senses into symbols to be deciphered or language to be translated. In essence, it turns facts into meaning by linking parts into wholes. It does not construct something unreal. That is the business of fantasy, but unveils the hidden reality." So now on to division. Let's talk about the division taking place within. I'm going to speak phonetically a lot during this presentation because it's one really important way we can see or read between the lines, between the dialects, actually. The dialects or prisons most people are comfortable in, the left or the right. And this stifles our vision to see truth because it's division. It keeps us one-sided within and outwardly as a result. Learning this great divide helps us see the illusions. Now, I'm in no way trying to tell anyone that this is 100% how the hero's journey goes. Not at all. I'm just focusing on the sciences found in it and what it is, what it's being, what is being said symbolically and phonetically, which I'm going to try to explain in a very simple way. This is about seeing where each one of us may be in consciousness and where we may go and why. So, looking at this equilateral triangle, I want you to think of something basic. I want you to think of the very fact that it took a mother and father to take part in your physical generated conception. So, mom and dad had intercourse and you came out, right? Okay, so you can look at it, you can look at this as a physical manifested trinity, a solid mathematical triangle, right? And let me ask, do the perfect symbols such as the equilateral triangle just solely exist for, making pretty art patterns or solving basic public school geometry math problems? Of course not. They are also discovered inwardly by man, individually, in order to help scientifically orient the self within. To understand the self better, that's what it's about. We can't be co-created without mother and father, without male and female. So the symbol of this equilateral triangle is about understanding the number 3. It's about understanding anything spiritual has to do with the number 3. Looking at the bottom right angle of the triangle, we see the right brain symbol. Okay? Upon birth and up until around 7 years of age, children have a lower vibration than consciousness, which is called the stage of theta, which is part of the imagination. It's the age when children act like they're, riding a horse when really it's a broomstick, or playing with, action figures and pretending to be a giant action figure. The idea is during this time, there are no programs to be conscious of. Therefore, the first 7 years are when children are most programmable. We start out in right brain infant mind. We start out with observation, intuition, theta, or imagination. The reason for this is it's impossible to start out with logical thought, analytical thought, science, math, or reasoning, which are all left brain aspects. We are born with the sacred feminine way of absorbing what we experience as babies, as children. We are born with intuition. We're born with absorption and observation, which are sacred feminine aspects. This is also where art, openness, and creativity are gained and acted out. So, when we start out in right brain, we typically leave the right brain and go towards and into the left brain, symbolically, which means that we have left the right brain, like leaving the nest. Now, that doesn't mean, we have left all the right brain aspects behind. We definitely take much of that with us. So we have gone from the right brain to the left brain because we leave the right to evolve. In ancient Egyptian sign language, it is understood that left foot forward symbolically means evolution, which means that the right brain controls the left side. So it is a right-brained evolution to go left because you have left the right brain to evolve, to go from east to west, so westing. And here we gain the left-brained aspects of logic, math, science, being analytical, and so on. These are obviously important aspects for holistic thinking. Now, the way the term westing is understood is it is the way towards spiritual bereavement, which is not good. Basically, we have completely left the right, which is also phonetically and symbolically about leaving rights or connection to nature. That's really important to understand. In my experience, it's a rebellious act to go completely left due to the push of institutionalized religion, having it, shoved down your throat. And one thing to keep in mind is many, don't even leave the nest. They stay home in a right-brained trap, giving authority over to institutionalized religion with their faith. And this truly means that the mind stays stagnant and never truly grows. It's a mind that never really questions reality and remains an infant and gullible to man's authority, especially through institutionalized authority or religion. This is also what leads to pseudo-spirituality. It also leads to religious extremism and unworthiness. Without elders or parents who are versed in the science of morality, it becomes really difficult to go into the right direction, and we have trouble understanding objective right from wrong, which is why we go westing or, drift far into the left brain. It's almost inevitable that we do this. And it's healthy as long as we don't get stuck in the left brain. Many of us become more, logical, mathematical, analytical, and scientific, which are, really strong aspects of the sacred masculine left brain. And this is where we, begin to evolve. But the problem is this becomes a cul-de-sac. It's a trap. We aren't supposed to stay solely in left brain. This is what can and does generate a patriarchal world. It also generates materialism, scientism, atheism, rigid skepticism, and nihilism. And it has immensely throughout our world for, the better part of the last 1,000 years. And just to be clear, scientism is an excessive trust or belief in modern scientific institutions, especially, government grant-funded institutions, to such a high level that the individual bearing the trust believes that these institutions are the only source of credible or verifiable truth. It's just another religion that, needs to be overcome for further evolution. This is the ultimate Westing, which, if not transcended, does and will lead to more government, aka more enslavement. And the same is for the right-brained imbalance. Staying here will only cause more stagnation, thus more enslavement. And it creates the illusion of right versus left. So, what generally comes next in the hero's journey? Well, we individually have to transcend dogma, aka learn the traps that hold us back and then overcome them and move on from them, from the religions. It's about understanding that we cannot understand the one without the two. We can't understand both hemispheres without understanding each one. And we can't understand the whole brain without both. We can't understand light without understanding dark. We can't understand right without left or right without wrong. It's about learning dualistically to be able to see separation and then understanding why it's an illusion, as one is never truly separate from the self in the first place. So, to leave or to have left is to go on the journey, to separate and learn why one must unite the hemispheres and return home to nature, which is right. This is why there are only two mistakes one can make on the path to truth: not starting and not going all the way. Which in this case translates to the first mistake being, not starting, or to not have left from the right brain on the journey to have knowledge, science, arithmetic, and the important facets of the left-brained modes of consciousness. The second mistake is learning all these things and not uniting both hemispheres and coming back home to nature, to the right place, which is all about finding your care and going all the way. So once one gains the courage to go up and reach the apex of higher knowledge, where an alchemical symbolic wedding takes place between the sacred feminine right brain and sacred masculine left brain, where one aligns in natural law, being reconnected with nature, but also, bringing the science back to nature. Then comes lumination of care, to be illuminated of care, and we fall in love back to home, back to the right place, which is down the mountain, to help others who are ready to learn. It's about giving back. This is part of the unfoldment of spirituality. You're the true hero on your unique journey. And, there's a lot more to this concept, and I hope this symbolic expression helps the viewer understand consciousness more holistically. We are all visitors to this time, this place. We are all just passing through. Our purpose here is to observe, to learn, to grow, to love, and then we return home. And that is an Australian Aboriginal proverb. On to the inherent Cosmic or spiritual tools and what they're used for. Well, first, what does inherent mean? It means built in, fixed, or permanent. And this spiritual being, the growth and unfoldment, and spiritual being the growth and unfoldment of the human soul, and the tools are the instruments, the implements, which are built in for the navigation and growth within. These discoverable tools are what we use to search with, to see with, to decode with, to help us understand what we can and cannot see or address with language fully. We use spiritual tools to build a strong foundation within. And, because these tools are inherent, they can't be and never have been granted by man. They are discovered. The individual wielder of these tools is the only authority of how and when they are used. These specific tools I'm speaking of are the Hermetic principles, green language, retrospect, and pattern recognition. And there's many other tools as well. In short, Hermetic principles help one to discover the inner workings of the cosmic law. Green language helps us discover the mysteries hidden within language. Retrospect helps us go back into the past self to face the illusions we've bought into, along with facing past traumas. Pattern recognition grants us the ability of awareness to understand our surroundings clearer through inductive and deductive thinking. Now, I'm only going to briefly cover these tools, but we'll be using and demonstrating their uses as I move forward through the presentation. These tools are 100% understood by the science of their workings and the imagination as their driver. This is about expanding the higher imagination because it's about the pursuit of gnosis, meaning the pursuit of empirical knowledge pertaining to the spiritual mysteries. So, starting with the 7 Hermetic principles, we have the first principle, which is mentalism, which means the all is mind. The universe is mental. Everything first starts in the mind. Mind allows imagination to travel infinitely. Mentalism is the key to imagining, which leads to manifestation of things and events. The second principle is correspondence, what I refer to as nature's spiritual mirror. And this principle is all about imagining. Like that which is below is likened to that which is above. And that which is above is likened to that which is below. It's a reflection tool. We can look at and observe a thing or idea and then use imagination to see that thing or idea in relation with something else, whether micro or macrocosmic, like a walnut resembling a brain or a hurricane resembling a galaxy. The third principle is vibration, which states that nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. If we orient our mind in understanding that the earth is moving at all times in space, the planets and the stars are all in motion. The space in between is constantly taking a different form, like water. When we can understand how this operates, we can see that even though a desk appears still, it's still in motion, whether, the rest of the world it's still in motion with the rest of the world and the universe. And even at the molecular level of that desk, there is vibration taking place. The fourth principle, which is polarity, tells us everything is dual. everything has its poles. Everything has its pair of opposites. Imagining absolute hot and cold as absolute polar opposites won't reveal the absolutes, but will reveal that there are degrees in between that can be recognized, like light and dark, or, like hot and cold, or, small or large. The fifth principle is rhythm. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. The swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. Consciousness rises and falls, empires rise and fall, and something as simple as a wave rises and falls. Imagining the repeated historical stories helps us see what state of consciousness we were in, what we're in now, and where we're headed. This sixth principle, which is cause and effect, states every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. So, imagine a guy robbing an old lady. He steals her purse. But weeks before that, that same old lady stole that same purse from a local store. The cause started at her act of stealing, which led to the effect of getting a similar behavior brought back unto her. And the same is true in the collective consciousness of humanity, which, actually really needs to be understood a lot more. And the seventh and final Hermetic principle is gender, which is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. If we imagine the penetrative force of the sacred masculine energy and the submissive receptive energy of the sacred feminine, we can apply this great understanding to all that is. A simple example would be the inside of a cup is submissive to the penetrative liquid poured in it, but the table holding the cup submits to the penetrative weight and setting of the cup, which makes the surface of the table feminine because it's submissive. Okay, so I'm going to briefly cover retrospect, pattern recognition, and then on to green language. Retrospect comes from the Latin retrospiciere. So retro meaning back and speciere meaning look at. So to look back at, to survey past events. This is the part of the imagination that orients the mind into the past to reflect on as much as one can remember. A lot of people tend to unconsciously abuse this tool and get stuck in the past. It is the spiritual tool that finds the illusions and causes of traumas that, never were dealt with, and then being able to face them and come to terms with them in order to generate healthy growth. So looking at pattern recognition, this is the special ability to not only notice a connection in things, but then logically imagine what those connections suggest about what may happen next. It's about consciously catching consistencies and inconsistencies in things like dialogue, math, science, symbols, behaviors, and so on. Pattern recognition works subconsciously as well, which can, spark a surprising conscious reaction when somebody finally picks up on or recognizes the pattern or patterns in things. So another spiritual tool that is key to using while in search for truth is the highly dismissed and totally overlooked language of calibration, which is green language. This tool, like many tools, can be improperly used. And of course, that can and has turned many skeptics away from further investigation of this tool. This language is a phonetic principle. Green language is more than just a wordplay or a pun language. It is an intelligent alignment to balance within and without, especially for those who are ready to hear and see, for those who can imagine at eye on. And, there's the first example. Imagination is imagine at eye on. The I is the E-Y-E-I because the imagination used is the ion. Green language is one of man's oldest spiritual technologies and part of understanding the alchemical wedding. This green language is a balanced frequency that allows one to see and hear phonetically, acronymically, allegorically, symbolically, anagrammatically, etymologically, and morally. Green because green is the middle frequency of the visible spectrum of color, which is about understanding electromagnetism and the wavelengths of visible light. Green is also the healthiest foods to eat. Green is the color of a healthy, visible nature, and it's the middle Anahata heart chakra color in the Vedic chakra system. It's a universal tongue where all language potentially meets in the middle for a higher understanding and communication. Most people in the West, or someone coming from a left-brain viewpoint, tend to think mostly or solely in terms of literal words only, which causes a limitation in thinking. It limits our ability to see and understand abstract concepts like what I'm sharing. When it comes to understanding green language, pattern recognition is part of understanding the process of language acquisition, which is about gaining the ability to understand how certain words and letters can speak beyond the literacy or what is taught. It goes beyond the appeal to authority. That's really important to understand, and this is where the higher imagination comes in here into use. I believe it's healthy to exercise this tool of green language freely, but to not get too caught up in trying to make every word seem like it has a deeper meaning, or you'll miss the point of its purpose. The main thing to keep in mind is this isn't a tool to play with when in search for truth. It's a spiritual tool for the serious student who's ready to receive clarity of that which isn't available in the common vernacular. It's about being open to the universe at all times. And the last thing I want to share under spiritual tools is what I refer to as the hermetically versatile mind, which is the ability to orient, recognize, envision, manifest, flip, reverse, cycle, mirror, measure, modify, rearrange any shape, symbol, word, idea, or archetype based on higher knowledge, experience, and the utilization of the imagination in order to understand something with full clarity. So let's look at the word understanding. How do we come to truly understand a thing, or a principle, or an idea, or something like a historical fact? I think we can all agree intuition plays a small part, but how do we come to understand, to an understanding? A couple of the methods we can use are the trivium and quadrivium methods, but first it's important that we break the word understand down. The word understand can be broken down into two compounds, which is the under and stand. So it literally means to stand under or to stand over. From the Greek etymology, understanding is epistemi, which means to know how I know. Either way, in order to understand a thing, you must see it in connection with some bigger subject or bigger whole and the possible consequences of this connection. Understanding is always the understanding of a smaller picture in relation to a bigger picture, or a smaller problem in relation to a bigger problem. People learn to understand things by measuring everything in relation to the very thing they are wanting to know. To understand basically means to agree upon. People who truly understand each other are those who are principled and equal in their knowledge. And only then is mutual understanding really possible. There can only be one understanding. The rest is either incomplete understanding or unprocessed knowledge. It's easy to say, I understand, but can it be demonstrated? That's the honest question we should all be asking ourselves. Something I find really important when listening to other researchers is when in search for an understanding, it becomes necessary to compare other descriptions we read and hear with the knowledge and experience we ourselves have collected. What you read and hear from other resources may in fact be the same thing you know, but expressed in a different way with different words in a different dialect. So the description is really what needs to be focused on, because that's worth more than the words and the dialects. We have to be able to take words and or phrases and see the differences and similarities between them. And, we may be seeing the same thing, but described in different ways. It's a form of hermeneutics. It's like the movies Avatar, Pocahontas, or Dances with Wolves. They are all basically describing the same thing, the same story, but are expressed in different ways. And that's the same with our language. So, now that we have a better understanding of the word understand, we can now look at the trivium, or the threefold path, to help guide us in the truth discovery process, which I'm only going to briefly cover in this presentation. When taking in information, whether knowledge from books or people directly, the first initial step of the esoteric variant of the trivium is the input of knowledge. This is what the imagination needs in order to build and expand consciousness. So we gather lots of information from multiple sources while simultaneously entertaining that information without dismissing or accepting it as truth right away. This is the raw info regarding the who, what, when, and the where. Then comes the process, which is about how we come to understand what we know by filtering through the knowledge to see what its purpose is, to better, realize why, or realize the why, or meaning behind it. When we bring logic to the knowledge and test it to see where there are consistencies and inconsistencies, imagination tries to fill in the blanks that the knowledge might be lacking. And then once one understands what one knows, then one can take action by expressing that knowledge, whether through speech, writings, or art. And this is where real and positive changes can and does occur from. So again, this is the trivium. It is the esoteric method of finding truth. So you have the input, processing, and then the output. So input, the knowledge, process towards an understanding of that knowledge, and then the rhetoric, the sharing, the speaking, the writing, and output of that knowledge, which is the act of wisdom. So now we're moving on to the temple within. Heed these words, you who wish to probe the depths of nature. If you do not find within yourself that which you seek, neither will you find it outside. If you ignore the wonders of your own house, how do you expect to find other wonders, like the universe? In you is hidden the treasure of the treasures. Know thyself, and you will know the universe and the gods. The ancient Egyptians saw the world symbolically, which is a lot of what this whole presentation is really hoping to inspire. They were able to read the world in this way, with the ability to hold different, sometimes contradictory ideas together simultaneously. On the literal side, the hieroglyph of a hawk stood for the animal, representing its outer meaning. But it also had another meaning, an inner or spiritual meaning, which is the cosmic function, or the cosmic function of the flight corresponding to the inner rise and fall of consciousness. Because of this, the hawk itself was a living hieroglyph. The symbol evokes this cosmic function, and one who reads it properly can participate in it or experience the forces behind its existence at work. This is about looking at and into the world, into the self. We have to really think and see symbolically to go back in history to see the answers that have been coded and preserved for progeny and prosperity. Through symbolism, we communicate with all that is, all forms of life, the divine creator, the universe. And this cosmic creation is filled with hidden, intelligent, fixed codes or scripts for us to discover, which ranges from something simple like jumping up and feeling the force of gravity pull you back down, or something advanced like understanding what the Great Pyramids can do for our evolution in consciousness. And the reason we have to go in or out to discover these codes in the first place is because that's where we learn the depths of appreciation. Appreciation is one of the most ultimate gifts or forms of respect we can give to the artist who created this whole universe. And it's by doing the great work and aligning with the universal law. The way I look at it is it's almost as if we were created for a purpose of potentially showing the creator what appreciation feels like. So putting the time into ourselves and appreciating is an ultimate form of respect of the higher self. A great philosopher by the name of Owen Barfield said that asking about the origin of language is like asking about the origin of origin. So in order to speak about the imagination, we must use our imagination. And in order to talk about language, we must use language. We can't stand apart from either one of them as detached observers, as we can with something in the physical world. So we need to understand them from within. from the inside. I think many people can grasp the idea of the temple within, but have never been shown or guided to the discoverable beauty that's truly found there. This ability to look in the inner part of the world, to see it from the inside, is a central theme in the knowledge of the imagination. It reoccurs repeatedly throughout its history, appearing in many different expressions. This is important to understand because it's about orienting the mind and expanding in the expanded range of consciousness to work with and then build off of. This is really how we deeply come to know who we truly are and why we're here. So, using the spiritual tools, we can learn to unveil the mysteries, the my stories within, the realm of the esoteric. A few really important sacred sciences or archetypes that have been created to help man see the reflection of self are the esoteric mystery traditions such as esoteric tarot, the Kabbalistic tree of life, esoteric Freemasonry, and astrotheology, aka science of the solar mythos. I'm only going to cover some science from both astrotheology and Freemasonry in this presentation. So first, I'd like you, the observer, to try a little experiment out. I want you to look at these two pillars. Now, if you can, I want you to cross your eyes until you see one really highly defined pillar in the middle. Take your time and make sure your head and eyes are level so that both pictures create, one solid image in the middle. Now, you should be seeing a way more defined pillar than what you see when looking at each pillar regularly. Maybe you've tried this technique out before, but if you haven't, this experiment is actually called stereoscopy, which is a technique for creating or enhancing the illusion of depth in an image by means of stereopsis for binocular vision, 3D vision. The word stereoscopy derives from Greek stereos, which means firm or solid, and scopio, to look, to see. It's a way of seeing three-dimensional. But the reason I'm having you try this idea, this technique, is to help your imagination get the idea of two eyes or pillars coming together in order to have a higher resolution of seeing. Both hemispheres of the brain working in unison to gain a fuller clarity of understanding knowledge inwardly. So it's a reflection. It's like an old 1990 box TV compared to a new, 2021 4K flat screen. Right? The definition is way better. And the reason for this is because technology advanced. Well, the same is true for our mind. In evolution, as we individually advance inwardly, we evolve spiritually. We're able to see the unseen realm clearer. This is also about rising out of our sleep state to our awakened state. So, with that experiment, we are looking outwardly with eyes crossed, to cause high definition of one pillar made by two. Now imagine with the tool of correspondence. Imagine that experiment reflected inwardly. This is the spiritual reflection. So instead of both eyes crossing to find the definition of the one pillar. It's the two hemispheres of the brain symbolically coming together inwardly in unison to find clarity in what we know. Now, how is this done? It's done through knowledge. Knowledge of the self. Knowledge of aspects of both hemispheres. Becoming conscious of both of our right and left brain. Here's another image to try out just for fun. I really like this one a lot with the bird. It's got a lot of really cool depth. So to understand this inwardly is to understand spirituality. And what is spirituality? In short, it is the science of moral and natural law. It is the quality of seeing dualistically, literally and symbolically. The whole universe is a symbolic unfoldment. Symbolically, spirituality is the ability of one who tears down the dogmatic walls within, or who, faces and transcends the illusions within. And this helps us gain higher resolution or wisdom and a higher understanding. So to better understand the science of self, we have to work with and understand the science of esoteric Freemasonry. Freemasonry, in short, is a system or science of morality veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. The science of Freemasonry traces back its roots to the dawn of the Egyptian mysteries and is at the center of all mystery traditions. This sacred science requires higher knowledge of self brought to it along with the orienting power of imagination in order to render a solid spiritual house within. And as far as I'm concerned, this science allows one to align with the divine in the most conscious, intelligent way imaginable. Freemasonry is really about the discovery of self. And in my opinion, the most beautiful way possible. I'm not going to cover this esoteric science in depth here, but I'm going to show you this symbolic mirror. It's the spiritually symbolic house within you. It's you. This archetypal image is the esoteric science of self. Now, I know this whole presentation is probably really difficult for many people, especially if you're coming from a purely left brain modality. And believe me, I'm doing my best to really point everything out as logical as possible with the limited time I have. But what I'm going to say is, looking at this image, we see that it's also a carpet. So now bear with me on this next part. That's because it's a magic carpet. And it symbolizes the way we orient our mind or use our imagination to take us anywhere we want to go in our inward universe or mind. So remember, the universe is mental. The all is mind. So this magic carpet can basically take us anywhere we wish within the limitations of principles, the laws of creation. This image is what's known as a tracing or trestle board, which is the symbol for natural or moral law. Its allegorical name is the Temple of Solomon, or Solomon's Temple. This is an esoteric reflection that helps us understand our temple within. Here we use the principle of correspondence. As within, so without. Left, looking at the pillar with the sun on the left and the pillar with the moon on the right, we see these are symbols that represent the sacred masculine brain on the left and the sacred feminine brain on the right. And this is where we use the principles of gender and polarity. This is where we bring the knowledge of the aspects of the left and right brain. This science is ultimately to help us find balance within, which is what the masculine blade symbol and the feminine chalice symbol coming together is really all about, which is unity. It's about balance. And when we bring knowledge to this image, this archetype, this symbol, it helps us understand something deeply important about ourselves. You can look at it as a reflective, esoteric encyclopedia. So the more you understand about the aspects of the sacred masculine and sacred feminine pillars, the more you can pull from this image, and the more your middle pillar of wisdom becomes defined with higher resolution, like the stereoscopic 3D experiment I just had you try a little bit ago. If you look at the cube looking stone between the middle and left pillar, that's equivalent to the old 1990 TV. And the goal is to evolve towards the 4K resolution TV, which is about perfecting the ashlar, like you see on the right, between the right and middle pillar, the ashlar being the cube. This symbolizes our ability to refine what we know, to visualize inwardly with a higher resolution. So now we're moving on to the destructive causation of the imagination. Our imaginations have been hacked, and it's our individual moral obligation to take it back. What disrupts and gets in the way of the imagination is ego. It's emotion and it's belief. And what happens when ego gets in the way? The mind lives in the R complex of the brain. So survival mode, which is the perfect way for others to easily manipulate that kind of a mind. And the elitists, or dark occult ruling class, are professional psychologists who gladly fill most people's imagination with their mindset and their ideologies that keep us in this low egoic frequency. Much of humanity has become their conductors who unconsciously carry out their fantasies, their agendas towards what? World domination. And many people willfully carry this out just by, willfully ignoring these sciences while submitting to and supporting all the awful things that these dominators do to the people. And the other two ways of manipulation are emotion and belief. Emotion being straight from the limbic part of the brain, and the reactive part of us that doesn't look at things rationally. So reacting rather than envisioning or being rational, being in the moment. And then there's belief, what destroys or stagnates our vision to see further. And that belief may be based in someone else using your imagination. And it's about overcoming the authority that's been indoctrinated into us since birth. When your education limits your imagination, It's called indoctrination. A very powerful quote by Nikola Tesla, and it's extremely true. We are living in what's known as the Maya matrix. Maya meaning the illusion of reality, and matrix meaning complex system of living inside that illusion we call life. So the phrase the Maya matrix means reality as we know it, as we think we know it, which is a perception of life and not life itself. Now, I'm going to cover many ways that our imagination is being manipulated. So, whether we are aware of this or not, the ignorant masses are being force-fed useful garbage for the sole purpose of control. And as long as the masses stay in ignorance and obedience to these dominators, then they have them right where they want them. A suppressed human mind will explore only what it has come to know, while struggling to think outside the box. There's the controlled opposition. This is where both sides, both dialectics, buy into one of the dialectics while endlessly imposing their will on each other through violence and the religion of authority. The political spectrum is a constant war zone and always has been. A condition of mind control that stifles consciousness is what that is. It keeps the masses spiritually bereft and in fear of one another. And this is taking place constantly, and it is really, really sad. But it's because we don't know this information. We don't understand the dialectics. We don't understand the aspects of the left and right hemispheres in consciousness. And how else do they continue keeping the masses in a constant state of fear? Well, one major way is selling the perpetual boogeyman, or for more security, aka more enslavement. This is done through the Hegelian dialectic, aka problem, reaction, solution. They create and manipulate actual problems, which causes the reaction, the outcry, which generates the usual proxy solution. And some of the examples are the Muslims of 9/11, the bank collapse of 2008, the 2012 Mayan calendar, the end of days, and among many other things, the more recent coronavirus. This is what makes people allow this to happen. The worship of authority. This is the monster destroyer of imagination, actually. And here is what keeps the masses in fear more than anything. And it is the driver of a delusional life. And that is money. Money makes a man act funny. Really. And not really in a good way. Money is most people's one true God. And people sure can use their imagination when it comes to what they do with the money that they would get or the money that they have, but can't imagine what they do without it. And that's a shame. It's really sad. Many people will argue that, that's just life, but actually it's mind control. And by the way, the last 5 slides are screenshots I took from the short film In Shadow, created by Lubomir Arzov, who is brilliant. He's a brilliant animator and brilliant mind. And this animation has so much true reflection of our society and how dark it has become. And of course, there's a beautiful, deep, positive spiritual solution, which makes it much more awesome. Definitely check out that video if you haven't already. So, what are many of the major destroyers of the imagination? Let's look at the abuse of entertainment. The abuse of entertainment. I'm pretty sure everyone watching this knows the mainstream news is a brainwashing session. More importantly, its purpose is to push and pull our imagination in all directions, north, east, west, and south. And each first letter of each direction spells the word news, anagrammatically. So it's an anagram. It's a word spell, broadcast. So the spell and the cast. To cast a spell, because they are casting spells through the tele-vision with a news compass to keep the ignorant masses confused. And they do a really good job of it. And then there's the abuse of porn, where people are imagining themselves as the people on the screen. And I'm not saying it's wrong to watch other people fornicate, but we have to understand how this addiction or easy route is used as a weapon. When it's abused, not only does it exhaust the brain of the important chemical called dopamine, but it disconnects the viewer from reality and degrades the potential strong relationships between men and women, making it much easier to be controlled. It really harms the imagination more than most of us know, actually. Then there's the abuse of video games. And I love playing video games, especially with friends and family. And, I know it brings us together in a really fun, unique way. And it can, definitely get addictive for sure. Many will argue that video games stimulate the qualities of imagination. And I don't completely agree. But it's about understanding that video games are a simulation that, when abused, keep the mind running away from reality. It's a way to run away from true purpose. And believe me, I know this very well. I was highly addicted. You couldn't get me to stop playing video games or, get the controller out of my hand. I played Madden and Halo and GTA all day, every day. And a little anecdote I'd like to share is I'm also a caricature artist, and I wanted to make a caricature book. So I sat on that idea for over a year because I was too busy being glued to the game or the games and Halo and Madden and GTA. And then I got, the Ring of Death on the Xbox. So if you're not familiar with what that means, my Xbox broke. But it was the beginning of my new relationship without video games. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me at that time. And I ended up finishing and publishing that caricature book. So the other form of abuse is what we watch and how much of it we watch, like movies, TV shows, and sports. So watching all this is more than, like when we're, watching all these things and doing this more than working on ourselves. This is about autopiloting the true power of imagination. It's about allowing others. Allowing other forms of entertainment to run our mind and manifest what we absorb. Just think of all the useless, trivial things we learn from these forms of entertainment. And yes, There is value in some of it, and yes, it's fun to use specific sayings from movies, and yes, sports is awesome to follow. But what's the worth in spiritual currency? Where's the growth at in ourselves? The other forms of destruction upon the imagination is through forced radiation and chemicals. Anything that slows the mind and body down slows the imagination down. We are surrounded by 5G radiation towers now. We are sprayed with aerosols, chemicals sprayed out of airplanes such as barium and strontium and aluminum. And those unevaporated, lingering trails also literally block the sun, which is very wrong. But it also symbolically blocks out the light to see with. So, literally and symbolically, cutting down our vision of the luminaries at night is what it also does. And our weather is modified by cloud seeding and the HARP program. We are also each destroying our imagination by large amounts of toxins we put into our bodies. We consume synthetic foods and drink lots of drinks that keep our body in a coma-like state where we aren't healthy. We're not health conscious enough, and becoming health conscious improves the imagination greatly as it generates an awareness of what's going in or on our body. Genetically modified foods, or GMOs, are very toxic, filled with hormone disruptors and covered in glyphosate, which is a dangerous cancer-causing agent. The word alcohol is derived from the word alcohol, known as a body-eating spirit. This really slows you down, and it destroys your liver, your kidneys, and memory over time. Now, even knowing that, I still love some good mezcal or bourbon, but again, in healthy, small amounts, not abused. People can put whatever they want into their body. It's their body, but no one has the right to force or bully shots into anyone else or limit food or travel to those who refuse to be inoculated. Besides, our inherent immune systems are highly badass and way more intelligent than, what's in a needle. If, someone, and, and if someone is immune deficient, it's usually because of poor diet, too many shots from an early age, and not enough playing in the dirt. Being around lots of germs. And let's not forget the one ingredient that is the very destroyer of the physical organ associated with the imagination. And that is fluoride. Fluoride is the neurotoxic chemical added to tap water that, along with many other disastrous issues, calcifies the pineal gland, which then weakens the function that it has in connection to the imagination. It makes the mind numb. It makes it fogged and docile. And here's an esoteric piece of art called fluoride. Obviously, we see the play on the word fluoride as a pun, but it's not just a pun. It's a deeper truth, as fluoride is a revealing word in green language, whether a moral phonetic message from the universe or mockery by the dark occult. It is clear that when consumed, fluoride directly calcifies the pineal gland, the third eye, which corresponds to the spiritual bereavement of man. Symbolically, the collective eye has wested into pure hell and chaos and materialism. Physically, And spiritually, it is the mind docile and weakened for complete submission to dominators. The enormous destruction of the imagination is the fear of chaos as a result of no government. And a society that fears chaos more than losing freedom is a society that will lose 100% of sorry. And a society that fears chaos more than losing freedom is a society that will 100% fall into complete enslavement. I hear people say things like, without government, people would be more dangerous and it would be a more chaotic environment. Or if there wasn't government, it would be boring and people would be too giddy and happy, and utopia just isn't realistic. Well, first of all, I don't believe in any such thing as a utopia. And I also don't agree with the new agey idea of kumbaya. And saying it, would be dangerous without government is illogical because government itself is dangerous. Very dangerous. Just look at the history of government and you'll quickly learn how dangerous it really is. With the power of imagination, one can envision or manifest a different condition than what's currently in place. The principle of mentalism helps us realize that for a different state or condition to manifest in the physical realm, it must first exist in the mind. And this is impossible when one's mind is in fear or their imagination is stagnated or used and manipulated by others. And here is the bane of freedom right here. Order followers. They carry out orders which manifest the order givers' ideas and control structure. All order followers are bereft of their own imagination. They are pure conduits of all orders, whether moral or immoral, which is why it's impossible for them to employ conscience and do the right thing in the face of doing that which is wrong. And here is the representation of a top-down, compartmentalized control system, which is comprised of authority types in lockstep who take orders and give orders under the rulership of the hierarchy, which consists of the dark occultists, who hold a power differential over the rest because they possess the highest level of occult knowledge and a full understanding of how the control structure operates. We have to see the control structure for what it really is: a disease of the mind, a disease of the heart, and a disease of the soul. They control others in fear, out of fear. It has nothing to do with looking out for, the best interests of others. Not at all. It never has been that way. It's not operating from the neocortex of the brain where higher learning and higher thinking takes place, where there's actual order. And it's not aware of what's happening within the self and around the self in which it operates. It's not conscious. The mind is not conscious. And, like I've said before, if we are operating in fear and confusion, then we are operating out of the R complex, the lower reptile part of the brain. And staying in fear and confusion keeps us in survival mode, where we don't critically think. We're just in fight or flight. We're in fight or flight mode. Completely right where we are wanted for these control structures to function. And, just becoming conscious of this information is the start of having the power to tear these structures down in the mind, because that's where they are. That's where they're planted and conditioned, and they want them to be kept there and grown. What prevents us from realizing the control structure and understanding the hidden knowledge that it works through is mind control. We've been conditioned to not care, to not love, to hate, to not think for ourselves, to only imagine what they want us to see. And this is all due to being separate in the mind. It's a conditioned illusion of being separate. It's division, separate from nature, separate from source, separate from true self-love. The dominators who erect the dark pyramid control structures around our world are only able to do so by manipulating and controlling how we think and how we feel through mind control. That's how they get their agendas done. It's about hijacking, the imagination to the point where one never questions anything, and they comply with and obey authority, and has no vision of how things could be other than how and what they are right now. It's about keeping those who don't use their imagination comfortable and where they're wanted at in the mind for as long as they're wanted there. This is ultimately what mind control is all about. So no one has the right to control others, and this is what needs to deeply be understood. We have to understand our rights in nature. And that's what this next part is really all about. The intelligent measurement of human behavior. One of the many reasons most people won't imagine a real solution to the suffering of this world, or won't imagine a world without government, is because they either don't know about natural law, or they willfully ignore this science. Like gravity, natural law is an unseen condition that we can really only understand by its effects. And I'm only going to briefly explain this. It's one of the most, if not the most important pieces of information anyone could ever learn and align with. It is the governing dynamic that intelligently measures all behavior of beings with the capacity of understanding the difference between harmful and non-harmful behavior. That's humans. This cosmic or moral law, this non-man-made, eternal and immutable condition governs consequences of these harmful and non-harmful behaviors. It is the binding conditions of behavior, and all humans are bound to this condition. Yes, we have the random component of free will choice to do as we please, but we do not escape the determined consequences of our free will actions. Imagination used in conjunction with the Hermetic principles, retrospect, and pattern recognition helps one to understand how the whole human behavioral system is governed. It's about understanding that every action we take is intelligently measured and reflected back unto us individually and collectively within a certain intelligently timed period. What we admit is what we attract. And this includes supporting something that is good or something that is bad. Does the action we individually initiate cause harm or does it not? Natural law or moral law is what governs and measures these actions. If we didn't have moral law, we could do whatever we wanted and get away with it with the most evil, harmful actions known to man with no consequences. Obviously, everybody knows that's not true. but we are bound by natural law, whether we believe this to be so or not. This is how we learn our life lessons. It's exactly why it's there, why it exists. It's mechanized perfectly to help us learn our lessons. I'm going to paint a simple mathematical equation to help your mind of the way in which we find out what inherent rights are by recognizing what wrongdoings are. And this is something I feel anyone who understands natural law can use to paint a picture in people's minds in a simple way. I've made this slide to help with this equation. Rights can be known by understanding what wrongdoings are through the apophatic method, affirmation through negation. So we can look at it like this. Think about nearly an infinite amount of pizzas, right? And they pretty much all have red sauce only. But 7 of them also have pineapple. Well, if there are 7 red sauce pizzas with pineapple, then that suggests that all the rest of the pizzas are red sauce pizzas only. Right? Okay, so 7 of those are pineapple. It's the same idea when using the apophatic method to discover rights, simply by understanding what wrongdoings are, or, what pizzas are covered in pineapple. But obviously, in the case of rights, there's nearly infinitely way more red sauce pizzas. There are 7 transgressions or wrongdoings, and then all the other actions in the universe are rights. So the understanding of natural law is centered upon bringing our own conscience into alignment with objective morality. So choosing right behavior over wrong behavior, which means definitely knowing which behaviors are rights because they do not cause harm to other sentient beings. And then understanding that behaviors that are wrong are the behaviors that do cause harm to other sentient beings, which are, like I just showed, murder, rape, trespassing, coercion, theft, assault, and willfully lying. Not understanding this is why most people are being manipulated, why most people's imaginations are being used to usher in world domination. Any societies of human beings that believes there isn't a natural objective difference between right and wrong behavior, and believe that human beings are arbitrarily or can arbitrarily create or decide or dictate what right and wrong are for themselves and others, is a society that can never truly be free. This is a society that embraces moral relativism. And this is why moral relativism is the destroyer of all freedom. Symbolically, from the ancient Egyptian priest class, morality is all about acting on the square. This is why an angle of a 90-degree square is a right angle. So it's to act rightly, to act justly and truthfully, or to act according to Ma'at, the goddess of law, the goddess of justice and truth. Ma'at is founded on the Masonic square. So looking at the papyrus, the square is the seat of Osiris, the god of the dead and underworld, in the judgment hall, where all are judged from the past and must be found perfect before they could proceed further towards bliss. This is just a scientific expression of the workings of moral law through archetypes from our, ancient Egyptian brethren. Symbolically, this shows the seat for judgment of objective right from wrong, to bring the material into perfect form, and to reject that which is not perfect, and to build on the square forever as a fourfold foundation. In other words, I look at this as meaning to build on a firm foundation of the understanding of natural law, and then working outwardly aligned in thought, emotion, and action. And that which is not perfect is the immoral transgressions of natural law, moral law. So now we're moving on to relumination. And relumination is also rebirth of the sacred feminine, aka generative principle, aka restoring the lost knowledge of the ancient Egyptian mythos. And all of this can be summed up in what's known as the lost principle, the generative principle, which is the eighth hidden principle, symbolic of true care. This principle encapsulates or contains all 7 of the Hermetic principles. The symbol for this is the circle that encompasses the seed of life. The seed is the generator. It creates. So the generative principle governs creation. It is the causal factor that goes into effect and generates the result of what we focus on and give our energy to, give our time and attention to. This is the equivalent to true care. I've tried to, talk about these subjects with many people and, what's going on in the world. And you know what most of them say? I don't care. And it's one of the saddest things I've ever heard. But what's interesting is most of these types of people have no problem being told what to care about by their tell-lie vision and local authorities. And what physical body part is symbolic of care? It's the heart, right? So we have to fix, reignite, or rekindle our collectively broken, scattered, dismembered heart back together, back to fire in the middle, balance. And the more we individually focus our attention on this, the more that we'll see a huge shift in the overall collective consciousness, a shift towards what we say we want, which is truth and freedom. And this takes courage to look, to listen, to research, to talk, and, write about what truly matters on a day-to-day basis, which acts as a driving force of our thoughts, emotions, and actions, which manifest into our reality. This is a huge, important part of re-illuminating the imagination. The generative principle is associated with the sacred feminine. Therefore, when we realize that the sacred feminine energy, our care of the world has and still is being systematically destroyed, then we come to understand the importance of restoring that care back into our lives, back into our hearts. And this isn't to say the sacred masculine isn't being brought to its knees either. It's equally important to understand. But I'll explain that in another episode on the podcast. So the sunrise is a big part in understanding the relumination symbol. The ancient Egyptian solar messiah archetypal god Horus rises from the horizon into midday and or midsummer, converting into the god Ra. The ancient Egyptian solar god Ra represented the sun and the Most High, or the Empyrean, whose symbol was the solar disk as well as the circle with the dot in the middle. This took place during the early phases of the solar mythos around 40,000 years ago, 40,000 BC. Symbolically, Ra represented fully raised or fully enlightened, which is what a human can only strive for. So the aspects and the circled dot symbol of Ra is really important to pay attention to. When we look at the word pyramid, we know that when broken down etymologically, it comes from the Greek pyra, which means fire, and then mid, meaning in the middle. So the middle fire, or fire in the middle. And this corresponds to the heart. It corresponds to the Anahata heart chakra, the middle chakra. And it corresponds to the middle pillar. This is the symbol of care. The fire in the middle needs restored. Care needs restored. Knowledge of what comes with the pyramids and all that is stored in them is about reigniting, reluminating the fire in the middle. This takes the higher imagination to understand, especially because so much of this vital knowledge has been lost or occulted on purpose. Okay, now there's also some green language here that actually leads to some science and math regarding the Great Pyramids. And that is, you can also say pyramid is pi, ra, mid. Pi as in the Greek number, the 16th number, as in the mathematical constant or infinite. And what is pi? We know it's the ratio of a circle's circumference to its diameter. So this means the circumference of a circle is a little tiny bit more than 3 times as long as its diameter. The base of the great pyramid is a square whose perimeter is equal to the circumference of a circle with a radius that's equal to the height of the Great Pyramid. So 2 times pi, or 3.14, times the radius, which is 481 feet, equals the circumference, which is 3,020.68. Also, keep in mind the ancient Egyptians measured in cubits, cubits, not inches like what we see here. Ra is also the symbol of the arch as pi. Pi is also referred to as Archimedes, constant. So, what the great pyramids really are is a corresponding temple to the human soul, the unfoldment of the human soul. And this is greatly what I mean with the title of this presentation. The archway is the solar path of the sun, east to west. So, I would postulate this is symbolically about being balanced and fully raised and aligned in the heart to the mind. It's about the restoration of true care because it brings us back to fertility rights with our ultimate responsibility as stewards of this planet. When one cares enough to begin to understand why the Great Pyramids were built, there will be great inspiration to restore the higher knowledge that was lost, because it holds very powerful keys to human sovereignty, aka freedom. And there's way more to that, of course. We have to keep in mind that this is all dealing with the solar mythos doctrine, post-stellar and lunar mythos. And in my honest opinion, some of the most important knowledge of ourselves that we could ever learn about is found in the mystery of astrotheology, the science of the esoteric zodiac wheel. This wheel is a correspondence to seasons, to the earth cycle, to the cycles of the earth, to some powerful allegories, including the flight of Horus, the cross of Jesus, King Arthur's Round Table, Hiram Abiff, and it corresponds to fertility, and especially to human evolution and consciousness. There's a reason why our ancient ancestors recorded the day sky and the night sky and then created archetypes to help humanity understand light and dark, to help us recognize how to survive through understanding cycles. So corresponding the zodiac with our consciousness is key to reluminating the imagination, because it is about seeing the parallels of coming up in consciousness to higher degrees to be able to see and understand the sciences of our ancient brethren who were masters at understanding and aligning with it and who lived harmonious. Way more harmonious than us in these days. So aligning to this wheel was an alignment to the cycles of the inner and outer life. And of course, in a really fragmented way, we still are, but with no real understanding of it. And some people might say, well, isn't it just, people aligning to something man-made? No, because we're actually aligning to a science of nature. We have to understand the difference between what is man-made that aligns in nature and what is man-made that is solely to benefit man's ego. So aside from all the other important allegorical sciences regarding the zodiac, there's one in particular that has everything to do with reluminating, and it's when we think of the Easter holiday, it's what many people believe is an actual historical event where a dead Messiah named Jesus rose from the dead out of a tomb. And I find it interesting that not too many people question this as, not too many people question this as well as wonder why these theories, or why there's no specific date for this event, even though it's specifically in April. So first, I think it's important to lay some important foundations regarding this science. The ancient Egyptians corded the circle with a cross to create the 4 seasons to better understand the nature of a full Earth cycle around the sun. Of course, they also understood this was in direct correspondence to the hero myth, going from ignorance, death, darkness, or birth, and then springing on to growth and illumination, which is about enlightenment or light, the sun's peak in the day sky of the summer solstice, like the god Ra. Also, like what I was telling you about the hero's journey. Then on to the autumn equinox, which is fall or falling, asleep, or back down to coldness, decay, and or eventually death. When it comes to astrotheology, it's important to pay attention to numbers, to seasons, to zootypes, solar, stellar, and lunar positions, and how it corresponds to allegories like the hero's journey of Jesus or Horus. It's about morality and how symbols help us understand the inner and outer world. It's about the solar ecliptic path of the sun and how it moves through each zodiacal house to help understand agriculture better. The ecliptic is an imaginary line on the sky that marks the annual path of the sun. It's the projection of Earth's orbit onto the celestial sphere. It's about the sun seemingly moving through each constellation of each house of the zodiac. It's how we understand agriculture through knowing the seasons of when to plant and when to harvest. It's about fertility, seeing patterns naturally when it comes to time to plant. So the sun is the principal symbol of deity and represents order, life, resurrection, fertility, and inward illumination of the soul. And, of course, the archetypal Jesus and Horus are venerated as the sun in the zodiac. The spring equinox represents birth and rising out of the dark, or dead, from the horizon, or Horus zone, or Horus rising. The rising sun or light. It's about regeneration, when to plant, and the beginning of the spiritual journey. It's important to know about December 21st, as the following 3 days are shortest in sunlight and the longest in darkness. This is when it is said that the sun, the S-U-N or S-O-N, dies upon the cross of the zodiac. Then, as many of us know, the sun is born on the 25th, where it is visibly noticeable that the sun is born and has risen again in the northeastern hemisphere. You could also say the 3 days following his death are correlating the 3 houses following the winter solstice, including Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. And Aquarius being the water bearer, with the child about to break the water out of the womb, and Pisces being all about the birth canal, which you should be able to, clearly make the connection in the drawing. It's the symbol of the yoni or vagina. And it's important to note that Easter Sunday, East Star Sun Day, occurs on the Sunday in April after the first full moon in the spring, symbolizing the lunar goddess Isis, aka Mother Mary, is full because she's pregnant with her son, the S-U-N. So the light, she's pregnant with the light. Jesus, aka Horus, which is born in Aries, the ram symbol, symbolizing the female reproductive organs. He then springs or rises again into the northeastern hemisphere out of his tomb or womb, either way, out of darkness. This is 100% also about reluminating. This is the time of the year when we are recharged, we're replenished, we're recycled, and when we are able to generate the most energy to be able, to be our liveliest in the summer. And the more we care to know this science, the more creatively charged we become. The imagination becomes more developed. It's like the symbolic nature of the S.E.E.D conference. And, there's a symbolic reason Brandon has these conferences at this time of the year. We are planting seeds for growth at a time when planting seeds works best because it's spring. And this holiday ritual of East Star Sunday, the rising sun from east, this ritual happens to fall within a 40-day time period between March 19th to May 1st, what's known as the season of sacrifice, expressed by the dark occult ruling class, basically, who run this world. And these dark occultists, these sorcerers, are high-level, selfish, psychopathic dominators who do wicked levels of sorcery, dark magic, generating and manipulating horrific events during this time period as a symbolic way of preventing rebirth of light, of fertility, of illumination. It's about symbolically cutting off any rebirth or rising from the dead And these acts are to keep the consciousness of the people in a low vibration of fear. It's pure evil. But they know, as long as we don't understand the mysteries, the my stories, we will always buy their his stories and their base desirables. Those who don't know the esoteric sciences of self are easily manipulated and stay confused in perpetual bondage. One last thing about Relumination I want to add before I go to the next topic is the importance of taking notes. We must care enough to take notes. And that's something I can't stress enough. And it's really important, because it really does fuel the imagination. So to align with truth automatically aligns us with those who are aligned as well. And this has nothing to do with groupthink. There is no authority higher than truth. This is why you can't believe me or anyone else. You have to do your own research. You have to see for yourself. We have to remember that we're not here to live according to his story. We're here to unveil and unfold the my story, the mystery. Each one of us is solely the authority, the authority of our own individual self. No one has the right to rule over another or be ruled by another. We are the authors who write our own lives with our own imagination, bound by the laws within creation. We are all naturally and inherently sovereign beings, and that's the truth in nature. And I know it doesn't seem that way, but it's true. The ruling class of this world have really done a great job at making most of us believe the contrary, which is why there's so much suffering. To have authority of self is about being the internal monarch, not a ruler over others and not ruled by others. The state in which one controls only one's own thoughts, emotions, and actions. And doing this by bringing them into alignment and non-contradiction accomplishes mastery of one's own consciousness, being unified and not living dualistically. It's about having control. It's about having mastery and ownership over self and recognizing we're not here to be ruled. We're not here to be owned or a slave by someone else. So to be sovereign, which we are, means not a slave. So allowing our faith, trust, and imagination in the hands of the authority of man never works out well, and can never bring about true freedom. Imagine a selfless world that you want to live in within the laws of nature, a world not inspired by selfish ego. Things that I imagine that I find to be very realistic and based in natural law are, this is not everything that I imagine, but I imagine way more people understanding and aligning to natural law. No slavery of any kind. That's what I imagine. More pineal glands activating at their highest potential. Order followers quitting their jobs, their cults. More bartering. Free Tesla energy. Hemp used to make many, 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 many things. Cultivating much of our own food. Collectively, collective courage to defend what's right, making more time and attention for the self, more, reading and healing esoterically, volunteering, no more slaughterhouses, logical conversation, balance, and restore the pyramids into our hearts. And like I said, there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more that I imagine. So that concludes my presentation, and I deeply thank you for making it all the way through, and I highly hope that it has brought clarity into your mind and into your heart. Much love, much agape. Thank you.